No.
I mean,
Because we have questions and answers if
mean,
anybody,
yeah,
I don't want to monopolize.
who has a comment, question, or what?
Okay,
Yes.
ma'am.
So I'd like to know if when you started doing this, did you decide that you needed to have standards? That you needed to educate yourself about why food was good? Or you just did it strictly by how it tasted in your mouth?
There is nothing either in academia or in the popular press.
No, but I mean, after you had done this for a while, did you start thinking, well, maybe we need to have
You mean if we,
criteria about why something is good?
well, we were
the
happy if
criteria,
we
I mean,
did.
you have to understand, I mean, yes, we're looking for food that is delicious, but in some ways, that's kind of secondary. It's more food that is authentic that was interesting to us. And in that sense, those criteria, the more we traveled, the more we were able to clarify what those criteria were.
And we'd know the
I mean,
good from the bad.
What's interesting, I mean, you know, there are so many regional specialties. I mean, especially like little pockets of regional specialty that we had never. You can't read. You don't read about. You don't know about. I'm not
Like pasties. in
like pasties
Michigan.
in the Upper Peninsula of
Right.
Michigan, or ploys in the in the international boundary in northernmost Maine. I mean, these are dishes that I don't know
Nobody
if
knows
anyone's
about.
ever actually documented them. It was only by traveling around and tasting a few and sort of seeing how they're served and seeing what they're served with that we then developed some criteria for what is a
Criteria.
ploy and how it should be served, just based on what we found. And you know, as I said, I mean, the deliciousness. I mean, I hate to say this because I mean, obviously, our Roadfood and Roadfood.com are guides to good eating, you know, to delicious meals, but our ulterior motive is less the deliciousness and more
Yeah.
the experience.
It would be rare if we wrote about a Bangladesh restaurant in Tucson, even though
It
you
might be
guys
wonderful.
might have the greatest Bangladesh food in the world. This is really a guide for people who are going to a part of the country and want to taste the food of that region.
And in some ways, especially at our website at roadfood.com, we're having, I mean, it's an interesting issue to sort of, you know, I don't have to tell anybody here that one of the things that defines this country culturally and specifically culinarily is how it's always changing, you know, and in fact, you know, so in fact, you know, if you go to Minneapolis, Vietnamese restaurants are very much a part of the food culture in Minneapolis.
The Hmong
Whereas, you know, when
population,
we
yeah.
started Road Food back in the early 70s, we wouldn't dream of writing about a Vietnamese restaurant in Minnesota. We'd be looking for, you know, wild rice or, you know, something that is sort of stereotypically Minnesotan. But in
But
some
now
ways,
that's regional
as that
food.
changes, you know, as the population changes, the diversity of the country is expressed in diversity of food. So, you know, I mean, we don't want Road Food to be a sort of a document of what used to be classic American food. It's sort of more a document of what is and continues to change.
I'll tell you what we did do at the beginning. We developed what we've since called Road Food Radar, and actually it still works.
Sometimes.
What?
Sometimes.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so we drive into a small town, and there would be the town cafe. Now, if their hours are 5 a.m. to 3 p.m.,
A
we
good
liked
sign.
that, because that meant the town people were eating there. If there is a big table in the window of the front of the restaurant, and all the farmers in their overalls were there, and it was the kind of table where Joe would leave and Steve would take his plate, that to us meant this is what the town eats. They have lunch there, they go home for dinner. We went to places where we always saw a cop car or a fire truck in front of.
Not on duty. I mean, not like.
No, but right, if the cops know where to eat in a small town. When we were desperate, we'd go to the barber shop. Barbers are the biggest, not only gossips in the world, but they'll tell you everything you want to know about the food of the region. We drive around, this we still do, we drive around the back of a restaurant, and if we see cartons from,
Portion controls from Cisco,
like Cisco, you know,
we drive on.
the places like to Outback where you, the portion, you know, 8-ounce ribeye, we go away. If we see produce coming off of truck, then we go there. If we go in and there's a pie case with blue ribbons that the owner has won at the state fair, that's for us. So there were little, you know, little bits and pieces that we would start picking up on.
And I have one other question.
Yes.
It's already passed visually,
Okay.
but there's a photo of
My hairstyles through the ages, right?
of a series of cars.
Oh,
stuck
a
in-
Cadillac Ranch?
Yeah, well, I don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
that's Cadillac Ranch, and it's interesting, I mean, if anyone is
cars that
familiar
are-
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in, just outside of Amarillo, Texas, right along Route 66. And it still exists, but it's
It was
changed.
started by,
Ant Farm is a group of artists.
No, the
Stanley
rich-
Marsh III was the guy who paid for it, but a group called Ant Farm created it.
Right.
And what's interesting is that photo was taken within a year after those Cadillacs were planted in the ground. And they're still there, but now they are literally encrusted with spray paint. They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, they've changed. They've changed dramatically over the years. And in fact, if you go to the stores nearby sell cans of spray paint for people who specifically
so
want to go
it's become
and
like,
mark up the Cadillacs.
instead of good old Texas bullets.
Yeah, when
it's
we were
now-
there, it was just like bullet
It's
holes. You know?
graffiti, which I find a little depressing.
who,
Thank you.
who else has something? Yes.
How long would you spend together in the car nonstop?
God.
Before you got a break?
3 weeks? You mean per day or?
No, at a stretch.
Sometimes-
How long was it before you got a break from each other?
Never.
That was that. People often ask, you know, how we ever got along, and one of the answers is to have a wide enough car so you don't fight for the armrest in the middle.
Because we would literally, at the end
We once bought an early Subaru, like before they became
Right.
normal-sized cars, like a real early
with
one.
no air conditioning.
It had no air conditioning, but it was really narrow, and I mean, we were.
We were black and blue from
Yeah.
like elbow. I mean, it's like being deployed in Iraq
Well,
without being
not
killed.
really.
That's claustrophobia of being, you know, with somebody and you can't get away. Now, we were happy, we were married, we were delighted to be together. And we did manage to talk from Maine to California and back about anything. In Buffalo, New York, we did something which we never do, which is we like to stay in motels or hotels. We don't like to stay with friends because we always feel we're imposing. But we made a whatever, and we stayed with these, you know, 2 people who said, we are your biggest fans, which anybody who's ever seen the movie Misery with Jay, you know, you don't want to be with your biggest fans, you know. I mean, but anyway, we stayed there, and I swear to God, I mean, we had such a horrible time. We talked about their towels, the bed,
The food they served us.
all the way from
Buffalo to California.
La Jolla, California, without a break. So, I mean, we were together sometimes,
2 or 3
8
weeks.
more than that, to go cross country and back.
Yeah.
It seemed like eternity.
Cars did you go through?
Oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
How
that.
many cars?
We used, you know, we
We
counted, we lost count at 30, I think.
It was more like, well, we never got rid of a car unless it was, a couple of occasions there were lemons, I mean, with less than 100,000 miles, and
Yeah.
often 200 or 300,000 miles.
Yeah.
But I think we went through at least 30 or 40 cars maybe.
Yeah, I mean, because we would just go, you know, all the time, and except for the barbecue squished car. I remember, I mean, we would, when I think about what we drove through, like Western Pennsylvania on Route 80
Oh, in the snow.
is, I don't know if anybody's ever gone on that route. It's like the snowiest, worst road.
And we were doing this in a Volkswagen Beetle.
Right.
And it actually slid off somewhere. And I honestly, this is my memory.
We went into
I remember us, this can't be true, but this is how
It
what I
was
remember. We picked the car up and put it back on the road.
Right.
I mean,
Right. And there were times also when, I mean, I get down on my knees and thank God every day for GPS because
Oh, yeah.
I can't read a map. And Michael he's one of these guys, you could drop him in a town he's never been in 30 minutes, he knows exactly where everything is. So Michael was usually driving, and I was in charge of reading the map.
which sometimes she was holding upside down.
And we would like literally go 150 miles out
The
of
wrong
our
way.
way, before we noticed that, it was, yeah. And then also, because everything's changed, when we would get out in like Gnawbone, Indiana, which is a real place, which is known for their persimmon pie, driving at night, and I grew up in Midtown Manhattan, Michael's from Chicago, so these lonely stretches of like in Nebraska or something, there's nothing there except a silo, and you turn on the radio.
Nothing.
And there's, nothing except somebody ranting about Jesus, and we got scared to death, and we turned it on. There's like nothing to do, nothing to look at, nothing to do except talk about people's towels that we didn't like. Was there another question?
We know you like El Charro. Do you have any other Tucson favorites you'd
Oh my
like to share
gosh.
with us?
Any other?
Please.
Yes. Well, let's see. Yesterday,
Tamale
I went to
Company.
the Tucson Tamale Company, whose proprietors happen to be right there. Yesterday, I went to Boca Tacos and Tequila with their new location, which I thought was great. I had their, the tacos are great, but I couldn't resist the adult cotton candy that she makes. It's like a big puff of cotton candy that is speckled with hot pepper, served with dried fruit that has been soaked in orange liqueur. It's kind of an amazing dessert. Where else? Well, I went to Ruiz Hot Dogs for a Sonoran hot dog. That was very good.
Poca Cosa.
Poca Cosa, the little one, formerly Little Poca Cosa.
Right. God, we've got a whole list. Does anybody have any suggestions?
Yeah, where should we go? Give us a,
Yeah, tell
Yes.
us.
If you haven't been to Tanya's
no.
on Grande with the Queen's View and St. Mary's.
Tanya's?
Tanya's.
What would we
On
eat
3rd
there?
Street. It's Mexican food.
Okay, cool.
Phenomenal.
We've got some time tomorrow, so we will check it out, Tanya's.
I grew up in Tucson for part of my life. My parents, long story, moved here when I was 5 and put me in, some of you guys might have heard of this place, Tree Haven. Worst school on the it took them 32 years before the FBI finally raided them and closed them down. It was torture the entire time. And my parents were in a phase of their marriage when I would say they made me eat shit out of a goat's dish. And my mother said, "Oh, Jane, stop." So, Tucson was, I have mixed feelings about Tucson. But I swear to God, from the 4 or 5 years I lived here, I lived on Malvern Drive where the Arroyo used to flood. And my father worked at Seal Peterson's. I don't know if anybody, and my mother worked at Seal Peterson's. I don't remember eating any food. I swear to God. What did people eat back in the 40s and 50s? what, I mean, other than what you might have cooked at home, were there restaurants?
Well, El Charro was around, right? Well, but that's, that's true about I mean, to
Maybe
say
I
there has
didn't
been
eat
a
anything for
renaissance of
5 years.
food in this country is a dramatic understatement. Even since when we started, I mean, when we started, you could go to a lot of American cities, like Cincinnati or Buffalo or Cleveland, even Chicago. I mean, the dining choices were very limited. Now they're just nearly infinite. There's been a tremendous change. Yes?
I'm curious, from the beginning, when you are trying to decide what you want your writing to cover, what made the public responsive to your books? Or-
Okay, I will.
Because there was no, I mean, how did you get it marketed?
We had 2 mentors. We had 2 angels who saved us, James Beard and MFK Fisher. James Beard, when Roadfood came out,
First edition.
the first edition, I don't even know how he got a copy of it. Loved the book so much, he just kept writing about it. And
Well, at the
writing.
time, he was the man. I mean, he was sort of
Right.
the most
Do you
respected
guys
food
know who
guy in the
James
country.
Beard was? I mean, he was it. He was.
And he had a syndicated newspaper column in several hundred newspapers. So when he said, this is a great book, people should, because he was somebody who, long before we ever got to it, was really interested in regional American food.
Right, because he grew up.
He grew up in Oregon, and so he had a sense that there was something out there besides what you get in New York.
Well, Julia Child was doing The French Chef. Jim Beard was really pro-American. He also, I think, got a real kick out of us because we were
such
we
hicks.
were so young and so stupid and so, I mean, anybody who thinks America is this big. So
Well, do you remember, we used to, once he wrote about us, he called and said, would you like to come visit me? So we became a regular thing. We would go down to New
Every
York
weekend.
and visit him at what is now the Beard House, but was then his house.
Right.
And we would go, each time we would go down, we would go to a favorite restaurant, or to a restaurant that he wanted to check out with us. Do you remember Chanterelle, when we wanted to go there?
Oh, I'm thinking of Lutece.
Oh, Lieutenant, that's
I
even
mean,
better.
does anybody remember what James Beard looked like? I mean, he was
Huge.
former opera singer, so he was very tall, huge, and he wore like a big caftan or cape. It was I mean, you could not miss that.
And he had a booming voice. He
Right.
was hard of hearing, so to talk to him, you had to speak very loudly.
And
But when
Michael
he spoke, it was very
also
loud.
has a booming voice because he bragged he doesn't need his microphone. But this is us eating with James Beard. We go to Lutece, which was it. I mean, this was the fanciest French restaurant in New York City. And Andre Soldner, who was the chef, was James Beard's best friend. So Beard thought it would be cute to bring us to Lutece. So we go in, and I mean, we're like this. We're afraid to look to the left or the right. We're seated at the middle table in the garden room, which is the VIP room. And Soldner comes out, gives Jim a big hug, pays no attention to us. We never saw a menu because chefs don't, they make special food for you. And once we got settled down and we went through 2 bottles of champagne.
And you have to understand, everybody in this dining room knew who James Beard was, because these
Right.
were all,
It was like that, what was that old ad when Merrill Lynch, everybody listened?
yeah, everyone was kind of like, what is James?
So, we're at this table and the chef is there and everybody's looking. Now, one thing Jim Beard and Michael and I have in common is we're dog lovers. And Jim had a little pug named Percy. So, we're drinking the champagne, we're leaning back, and Jim in this operatic voice, Michael, I have to ask you a question. Percy's anal glands are stuffed. What should I do?
And I knew how to deal with impacted anal glands.
So you put one finger on one side of the anus.
But I had to say this very loudly for Jim to hear it. It's like,
So life with Jim Beard wasn't necessarily all about food. And Chanterelle, when that opened, that was the restaurant of the moment.
It was the hot ticket item in New York. And so Jim called us and said, let's go to Chanterelle. It's this new place. I'm hearing great things about it.
You never get a reservation.
So, the reservations were like 6 weeks, 6 months out. So we got into New York, and Beard said, I don't understand it. I called and said, this is James Beard, because in those days, that's what, he didn't go incognito. This is James Beard. I'd like a reservation for 3 on Saturday night. And they told me that they couldn't take me.
So he said, I called like every 3 days. And I said, this is James Beard. I'm sorry, Mr. Beard, we have no room. So he got,
doesn't happen to James Beard.
Right, so finally, they gave him a reservation, and he schleps us along. And we figured out what the reason was. When Chanterelle opened, their men's room was not big enough to accommodate him. They had to redo the entire men's room. So it had like one enormous, stall. And so he said, Jane Michael, come in, you must see the James Beard Memorial Toilet. So when food writers get together, does anyone remember MFK Fisher? Because she's Grand Doyenne. I mean, she's sort of the great writer of food. And we went to visit her, and she lived in Glen Ellen, California, in the wine country. And you think we talked about food? No. Her daughter, who she had a relationship with, had 2. They weren't Komodo dragons, but they were like monitor lizards. And the daughter dropped them off at Mary Fisher's house. And she said, you don't have to worry about them. They don't do anything. They don't move. They sit like this. And I'll come back in 2 weeks and get them. Well, the minute the daughter left, it was monitor lizard mating season. So we were like having bouillabaisse or whatever.
And they were flapping around.
Lizards are like flying through the air, copulating on the table, So the food world's fun.
Do we have yes.
I just had a question about how technology has shifted the road trip in terms of we have Google Maps and Yelp, and how has that affected our engagement with talking to actual humans on the road, and how do we think about that?
I'm very nostalgic for what was.
But there's no denying that it makes it. I mean, in some ways, our life has gotten so much easier. Because when we started, as Jane said, there were no guidebooks. And furthermore, if somebody had a suggestion of a restaurant that we should go to, they would take pen to paper, write it, and send it to us through the mail.
We brought our typewriter.
Yeah, we carried around portable typewriters.
Yeah.
And now, if somebody has a suggestion, they just go to roadfood.com and send it to us. And and so in some ways, for us, it's really easy. And once we actually get to a restaurant, it's the same. I mean, nothing changed. I mean, the logistics of getting there has become different and easier. And I don't want to get into Yelp and those other things. I mean, they can be helpful if you use them, very cautiously.
We actually had a weird, I'm not going to say where we had lunch, but we had lunch in Tucson at a place that we had written up many years ago. And when we got there, the guy, the owner's son, recognized us. And he said, oh, yeah, I remember Roadfood. He said, you should go look at what that diner, drive-in, and dives guy do, and Man vs. Food, and all the TV networks. I mean, they own what we started, and what can we do except be so pissed off we have an aneurysm? But I mean, it's a different it's a different world out there. So, yeah, right, tell me about Guy Fieri, who's stolen every friggin' thing from my book that he's ever put on TV. Unfortunate. But here's not the revenge. Here's, what do you call it when things equal out? All right, well, whatever the word is. Okay, about 2 years ago, Michael moved to South Carolina because we split up. He moved to South Carolina, and I live in Connecticut, and we still work together all the time, but we don't live together. We had been married for 38 years, and when you travel for 38 years, you get a lot of crap in your house. Every menu, every placemat, every Rand McNally atlas, everything. We had 6 storage lockers in Connecticut, where I live. There was like $120 a month for these freaking storage lockers filled with, we didn't even know what was in them. We just throw all our crap in them.
Thousands of 35 millimeter slides and 2 1/4 negatives.
No, everything. I mean, manuscripts, books, everything. So we were giving a road food dinner in Washington, D.C., and we took some time out to look at Julia Child's kitchen in the Smithsonian in the American history part of the museum. And Michael and I are walking around, and I'm saying, that's wrong. That wasn't that. This is blah, just blabbing on. And the curator, 2 of the curators were behind us, and they said, "Are you Jane and Michael?" And I said, "Yeah." And know it all that, this is wrong. And Julia Child put her spoon there. She didn't put it, And at one point, I think we went to lunch with them. We said something about, we've got 6 storage lockers full of 50 years of traveling on the American road. Well,
They started rubbing
they
their
were like
hands
the
together.
monitor lizards and the MFK Fishers. They sent 4 trucks to Connecticut. They came wearing white gloves like curators wear. They spent a couple of weeks, they took everything, and we now have the Jane and Michael Stream permanent collection at the Smithsonian.
And we're saving $120 a month.
Right, which Guy Fieri doesn't have. So, but the funny thing is, because truly we had, to them it was priceless artifacts. To us it was 38 years of shit. We had nothing else to do. I threw in the locker. And they're, very, very academic and very serious curators. And they would call up and they'd say, "Jane, I don't mean to embarrass you, but we found your bra. We found Michael's colonoscopy report. We found your tax returns from, because you throw it, I said, well, you put them on exhibition, please." So anyway, tables evened out. We may not be Food Network stars, but we're Smithsonianers.
What else?
Yes.
Yes. Sherry. Yes.
So, I'm not to put you guys on the spot, but what, each of you, 2 favorite food cities?
Food cities?
Yeah, like if you could only go 2 more places, 2 more cities, you can eat anything there, you can eat all the time
That's
there. I know
the
it's hard.
worst question. That's like asking Hugh Hefner who his favorite playmate is. It's like the next one. Actually, let me just think a minute about that.
All right.
I love Chicago, actually,
Food-wise, yeah.
even though that's your city.
Yeah. This is an odd one, but I'm an ice cream fanatic, so I would say Buffalo, New York.
That's
I mean,
true.
aside from the wings are
Oh,
great,
and beef on
beef on
weck.
weck is great, and great ethnic food of every kind, but the ice cream and parlors and candy stores of Buffalo are just phenomenal. I mean, it's like Nothing's changed in them since the 20s and 30s. They're these beautiful places. Everything is made from scratch. I mean, if you get whipped cream, they whip cream and put it on. If you want marshmallow topping, they make marshmallow, everything, the fudge sauce. It's all like absolutely made from scratch. It's
Yeah,
served
you
in
are
these
really an
beautiful
ice cream
tulip
fanatic.
containers. But, you know, beyond those things, Buffalo is not that wonderful, but I love being, there's never enough time to eat everything I want to eat in Buffalo.
My luggage got lost. I flew from JFK to Salt Lake City to here, and I think Salt Lake City is where my luggage got lost. But it reminded me of a long time ago, restaurant that I think is still there, The Lambs. It's been there.
No, it's gone,
Oh,
closed.
from like 1920. And Michael and I went, this was like 30 years ago or something. And, you know, we forgot we were in Salt Lake City, and, you know, Salt Lake City has certain cultural whatever. So we had been on the road all day, and we ordered dinner, and the first thing they said is, oh God, I really want a drink. You know, can you bring me a scotch? And Michael said, I really want vodka or something. So the waitress, the hostess got up, and she said, follow me. And we literally walked, how far was it, from here to maybe where that man with the camera is? A long hallway to an armoire that said the Cabinet of Shame. And it had little like
airplane
airline
bottles,
size
yeah.
liquor bottles. But I mean, it was like walking the Green Mile, you know, to the death row.
Okay, questions like this, I have to, the other one would be Charleston. I mean, I happen to be, I live in South Carolina, but Charleston is an amazing, it's old and new and, you know, traditional and cutting edge. It's got everything, not to mention incredible seafood. I mean.
It's so hard, God, it's really a hard question. If America really was as big as a placemat, it would be easier.
Anything else? Are we done?
We're gonna, I think, wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed talking to you.
I guess we will be outside, yes?
Okay.